Welcome to Gold Star Classroom, the podcast where our panelists go back to school. We'll grade them on their answers to a variety of general knowledge and trivia questions. They don't know what we're going to ask, and we don't know what they're going to say. The student with the highest grade at the end of the class will win the coveted classroom prize, the Golden Banana. I'm your host and headmaster, Professor Jerry Jaffe. Let me welcome you all to today's episode of Gold Star Classroom. I am Dr. Jerry Jaffe, your host and headmaster, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's students. Sitting on my left is John Hoffner, technically a comedian.
Hey, man.
Hey, man. That's all you got?
Well, I thought we could build off that.
Okay, fair enough. Sitting on my right is Marty Drexler, full-time teacher, part-time comic.
Yo, what up, doe?
John, you get 5 points for your reply looks much better now.
By comparison.
And our third student today, sitting directly across from me, an alumni of Lake Erie College, Richard K.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you, Mr. K?
Doing right. All right.
And so you should be. Well, welcome to today's class. It'll be my job, your teacher, to ask you a range of quiz questions from across the expanse of human knowledge and experience.
It's intimidating.
And it can be intimidating, but I'm here to guide you through it. And based on your answers to these questions, you will receive grades. The student with the highest grade at the end of class will receive the coveted classroom prize, the Golden Banana. Are you gentlemen ready to begin?
Yes.
Yep.
All
Sure,
right.
Absolutely.
I'm going to ask you a very simple question. It is about something that you all have and use every day. And that is simply this. Who first coined the word battery? Where does the word battery come from? Marty.
The Energizer Bunny himself.
The Energizer Bunny. I'd like to point out that the Energizer Battery Company is not in any way a sponsor of this podcast, nor do they endorse that answer.
We're allowed to think our answers out loud, right?
Absolutely. What are you
Okay.
thinking, John?
Because I'm assuming that the word battery existed before the actual fuel cell battery. So you mean as it pertains to a battery, right?
Okay, you've sussed out a possible pit trap. So I'm referring to the electrochemical device that we nowadays call a battery.
Not as an assault and.
Not as an assault and, although as John was implying, that expression is actually, well, I don't know about the expression, but that usage of the word battery may be older than using the word battery to describe the electrochemical containment device. I will give you a small clue. It was a very famous person that you all know who first referred to such devices as a battery. And there was a reason that he and or she called them battery or batteries.
I actually have, the answer that comes to mind is probably still as much off as the Energizer Bunny, but...
What comes to mind, Marty?
We'll try Benjamin Franklin.
Ooh.
We have a vote for Benjamin Franklin. Would anyone like to agree or disagree?
I would like to disagree on no grounds.
Okay. Well, on what grounds do you say Benjamin Franklin?
The genius of his time. He came up with a lot of things, and why not? I mean, just add that to the list of just amazing things he did during his lifetime.
What do you think, Richard?
Well, I'd like to agree that could be him based on no evidence of Benjamin Franklin, but I'm leaning more towards Thomas Edison. He seems like someone who could have developed something of a current charge. It seems more in tune with his work.
Well, his laboratory is known for many modern inventions that we now take for granted, including the electric light bulb as we know it. So I could see why you might think that, although I do like the thinking that went into Marty's answer. John, what do you think?
I'll just have to take a guess.
Okay.
Because I can't even place a time frame for when batteries came into existence. I'll say Nicholas Tesla.
Tesla. That is worth points for being more obscure than Edison or who did you say? Ben Franklin.
Sure.
Ben Franklin. I've heard of him, as we all have in this class. And point goes to Marty Drexler, Gold Star, Benjamin Franklin.
Wow.
Wow, awesome. I had a feeling. I had a hunch.
Now, when he used the phrase, the modern batteries as we have in our phones or in our flashlights did not exist yet. So, what was he referring to then?
Wow. Could have been a number of things. It's hard to put yourself in the mind of the genius.
A genius of that caliber?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, it may be difficult for some of you, of course, but I find those easy slippers to slide into. We've all learned, although perhaps not 100% accurately, that Benjamin Franklin did experiments with electricity.
Yeah.
The kite and the key and all that kind of thing. In 1748, he was working with the primary scientific tool to study electricity was called, anyone know? You might know this phrase after I say it, Leyden jars. I don't know if you've heard of Leyden jars before, but that's what he used to do his electrical experiments, were these containers. They had medium in them, a liquid, and they could test electricity experiments of that sort. And something about those jars, for some reason, caused him to start referring to them as batteries. Any thoughts? Any ideas?
You would think we would have some.
Somewhere in this classroom there are thoughts, and I shall find them. I will not rest until I have found them. Well, to go with actually what you were saying earlier, John, since these electrical tools were not referred to as batteries until Benjamin Franklin did, the word battery already existed.
Mm-hmm.
So what could be another use of the word battery outside the realm of electrical experimentations? And I will say outside the world of assault as well, Marty.
Was he applying some kind of force to the jars to excite the electricity?
One possibility, the use of force as part of the experiments. Anyone else just have any other thoughts, guesses?
Can I phone a friend? My brother's a science teacher.
Well, in this classroom we refer to that as cheating, and your grade would be penalized. I'll give you one other clue. It's kind of, you can decide if it's a helpful clue or make fun of the clue if you prefer. But when scientists of that era, the 1700s, worked with these jars, these Leyden jars, they usually needed a large number of them. There wouldn't be just one or two. There would be like a collection of them. And so having a large quantity of these jars together, Franklin thought it resembled a battery of cannons.
Ah.
And so he started referring to his collection of jars as a battery. And I will say, that word came into use to refer to these electrical devices 1748.
Wow.
1748. So that's when, in the sense that I first asked, the word battery, therefore, was coined, if not invented, but coined. 1748.
That's much earlier than you'd think.
It is, although now I'm going to ask you a related question about the history, not so much of batteries, because again, if we think of the modern electrochemical version of a battery, but these Leyden jars, which Franklin was using, how long have they been around? Which is a way of asking how long have people been doing experiments with electricity using similar devices. Any thoughts? Anyone ever come across this?
I'd only be venturing a guess, but I know that there were ancient civilizations that were probably much further along than we tend to think as far as progress came.
You are groping in the right direction.
So I don't know. I'm gonna say maybe as far back as the 12 and 1300s. 12
and 1300s.
I'd go even further back, say more in 2,000 years ago. I think they found some ancient remains of what could be a battery in the Middle East. I vaguely recall. It has a name. Something.
What do you think, Marty?
If we're doing the closest without going over, I'll go with 1399.
Well, of those three reasonable guesses, all with their own rationale and reasoning, Richard's is the closest. There have been what are thought to be Leyden jars found amongst Egyptian ruins, possibly in tombs or pyramids. And
I should have went the other direction.
Yes, you went the wrong way, Marty. Now, because that's a couple of thousand years old, if not older, there is like a little question mark. Were these really being used for electrical experiments? That's more of a deduction than a fact. But it is guessed that some versions of Leyden jars go back to
Maybe
the ancient Egyptians.
maybe they were putting their fishing gear in there.
Yes, or different parts of their soul during the mummification process.
I will say this is where sometimes the homeschooling can be a hindrance for me, because I was specifically thinking of ancient Egyptians, but I just didn't know where to place that.
Your best guess was 1200.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So we'll give an extra bonus points to Richard. Although I do want to ask the question that was implied by my first question before we stopped talking about batteries. And that was, not Franklin, not Edison, not Tesla. Who is actually credited with inventing the modern electrochemical battery? This is the part where my engineer Steve will add the sound effects of crickets. Either that or this 10 seconds never happened. Does anyone know who actually invented the modern battery?
I have a sub question.
Lay it on me.
Do you lose points for guessing too excessively?
No, there's no penalty for wrong answers. Wait, there's definitely a penalty for wrong answers. What am I saying?
But not
John,
not for trying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How about Marie Curie?
Marie Curie. Okay. Since that name obviously caught me by surprise, we can deduce that's probably not the right answer. But for some reason, such a charming answer, I feel like it should get some points anyway.
Well, I would venture a guess that whoever did get coined the invention of the battery had to have his name tied to it, so I'm going to say Duracell.
That's a sound answer.
What I like about Richard's guess is that his logic behind it is correct. When you hear the name, you will realize that it's a word associated with batteries.
I need to change my guess.
Yes.
I'm going to say Ray Ovac.
Marty, any guesses over there, or do you know who actually invented the modern electrochemical battery?
You were close there, Jonathan. It's that's actually his last name, Jonathan Rayovac.
Jonathan Rayovac? I don't know if you've ever purchased a 9-volt battery or did anything with volts or voltage in your high school science classes.
Negative.
Or AKA your garage, John, in your case. Giuseppe Volta invented the modern electrochemical battery.
Italian.
The invention is credited to the year 1800.
Huh.
Okay.
Volta's device or invention was not a miniature battery that we could put in the backs of our phones. It was more of an experimental laboratory device that would go on the top of a table. Could be several feet tall. And it was made by sort of piles of metal that were conducive, and then various chemical and electrical components of which I don't know the technical specs, but that's what he invented, was this, sometimes referred to as a voltaic pile after his name, Volta. So Volta is the inventor of the battery. Let me ask one more question, since this is going so well for you guys. Do you know anything about batteries?
Nope.
Nope.
If you put them in and they don't work, try to flip it over. That's
I didn't even know that one.
that's about it.
Well, you get 1 point for knowing one more thing than John did. The great Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "Bad times have a scientific value. These are occasions a good learner would not miss." Our discussion of batteries has confirmed Emerson's premise. So I congratulate you all on justifying his optimism towards bad times.
Affirmative.
Affirmative. Let us leave the world of science and technology and turn our attention to history and indeed pop culture. There is, and I know there's a good chance some or many of you will know the answer to this, a famous old rhyme, actually in the rhythm of a skipping rope rhyme, technically, about someone taking an axe, giving their mother 40 whacks. Do we know who this rhyme is about? Do we know the rhyme? You've ever heard the rhyme?
That's not Miss Mary Mack, is it?
It's not Miss Mary Mack. I've left out the person's name to see if you could remember it. So this person took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41.
This is related to the person who originally invented the other battery. That's made a connection there.
It's the
Yes.
source material that Game of Thrones was based on. So it's like,
I like 5 points for the Game of Thrones reference. That's all I can say. That's a nice one. If the name is not coming to you, I'll give you one other clue. This is based on a real crime. The crime took place in 1892 and was, to use a sort of flippant comparison, the O.J. Simpson trial of that generation. It was a sensational media murder story that was widely covered, undoubtedly leading to this person becoming a kind of folk figure, not only in children's skipping rhymes, but frequently depicted in movies and stories and et cetera, et cetera.
feels like we're going to kick ourselves at the end of this.
There's going to be some kicking going on. I mean, I will grant you, discovering that Benjamin Franklin coined the phrase battery is pretty obscure. But I would be surprised that I could have 3 adult students in the Gold Star classroom and none of them know who that skipping rhyme is about.
I hesitate to say, but I wanted to mention Jack the Ripper for some reason.
Jack the Ripper, no, famous British serial killer, sometimes called the first serial killer, are creating the archetype of what a serial killer is now considered to be. This folk figure, and indeed historic figure, is American. The crime happened in the New England region.
Did you say she in the rhyme?
I did. You did catch me out. It does say she in the rhyme, and it is indeed a woman who stood accused of murdering her father and her stepmother, in fact.
Which should make it stand out even more because most serial killers are men.
Right. Although, if this person's victims were limited to 2 family members, they probably would not be classified as a serial killer. I think we could double check with the FBI on this, but I think you got to get up to 3 or 4, and there has to be a little bit of a pattern involved. And this person was never associated with any other violent crime before or after the death of the parents.
I'm drawing a complete blank. The only, if we were able to phone a friend, which we made it perfectly clear we're not.
Yes,
I do know someone who was actually alive during that era. I would phone Dick Goddard, but I'm at a complete loss, especially with being a woman. That doesn't really. I mean, I was thinking like the Boston Strangler or
right.
somebody from.
Sure.
There was like a knife. Somebody with famous for using a knife too. But I can't. Yeah, but I don't think that was a female either. So
No. Well, this 19th century female O.J. Simpson's name that all of you, in fact, know is Lizzie Borden. Marty is nodding. Richard and John seem skeptical that I would expect them to know who Lizzie Borden is.
I thought it was going to sound familiar. I don't.
And that
know
doesn't
I've
ring a
heard
bell
that
to you at
story.
all?
No.
Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw that she was done, she gave her father 41.
I mean, ultimately, it's good that we were able to get a children's rhyme out of it.
Yes. So there's a benefit to society. Indeed.
yeah, sleep tight, kiddos. Sweet dreams. Yeah.
Well, I now feel like tugging at the threads of this historic event are not going to go much further. For example, that what I thought was famous children's rhyme exaggerates the number of stabbings involved. It was about 10 on each the figures, the father and the stepmother. There was a large trial covered in the press. And Marty, do you happen to know whether or not Lizzie Borden was found guilty of the murders of her parents?
Strong sense that she was. I believe she was definitely sentenced. I can't remember if she got life. I do remember the story now. As soon as you mentioned the name, it brought me back. But I can't remember the.
Marty seems to think she was found guilty.
That's what I'm leaning towards.
But then, any thoughts? Any guesses? Any contrarianism?
I would tend to agree with that.
Right.
I don't think women were getting out of a lot of things in the 1890s.
Couldn't even vote back then.
Indeed. Well, indeed, on June 20th, after deliberating for an hour and a half, the jury acquitted her.
Wow.
She was found completely not guilty. And again, it's sort of flippant to keep comparing it to the O.J. Simpson case, but basically, there was a lot of circumstantial evidence. Like, so much circumstantial evidence that it seemed obvious that she must have done it. But when, in fact, paraded in front of a jury, there was just not that piece of evidence that proved she did it.
So a squirrel snuck in through the side door and just went berserk, I guess. Wow, that surprises me. I thought it went the other way. Just something like that. Well, with today's forensic science, obviously you'd have a lot more evidence either way, which would either prove or disprove.
Well, one of the things that they did look for, a la CSI and Dexter, is blood evidence. And those crimes were bloody, but they could not find... I mean, she was found like within an hour of the bodies being discovered. I mean, I don't know how quickly, but I think she was actually in the house when the bodies were discovered. So it was not like some manhunt or something. She was right there. There was no blood on her or her clothes. However, it was discovered that day she had burned some of her clothes. So again, it's like circumstantial evidence. Why was she burning clothes on the day of the murder while she coincidentally has no blood on her?
I'm on her side.
Yes.
Seems normal for the times. Everyone's wearing their clothes then.
Yeah, what else were they going to do? No bloody clothing was found, although a few days after the murder, Lizzie was found burning a dress in a stove, saying it had been ruined by paint. The murders were committed with an axe or a hatchet, and a hatchet was found in the basement, but they couldn't convincingly show that it was the actual murder weapon. And again, to go with the blood evidence, the hatchet head had no handle. So the argument was that it had been removed to hide the blood, but nonetheless, no handle, no bloody handle, and it's all circumstantial.
Yeah, imagine having the burden of proof in court in that time when you have really no way to prove anything scientifically compared to what it's like now.
One of the odd footnotes to the court case was that the victims' heads were removed during the autopsy, and the skulls were actually used as evidence in the trial. Like their skulls were brought into the courtroom to show the damage and the blows and things like that.
Good thing that's not creepy. Right?
Yeah, nothing creepy about that. That's normal forensics.
And the date happened to be October 31st.
Yes. Lizzie Borden's father was a wealthy man, but like some kind of cheesy cartoon or melodrama, he was well hated in the town, including by his own children, but including by every other business person that he dealt with, employee that he had, and so on. But he was known for being stingy with his money, especially with his two daughters, which after his and his wife's death, there was actually something of a legal battle over the estate, but basically the daughters got access to money that they couldn't get while the father was alive. Thus, again, casting a shadow of, circumstantial evidence over them.
Plus all the royalties from the skipping rope.
Yes, all the royalties from the rope skipping rhyme. I'm sure that her estate is paid every time her likeness is used in a toilet bowl commercial or something. There is in 2014 a Lizzie Borden made-for-TV movie out. Interested in made-for-TV movies about Lizzie Borden? There's one that you can see, I suppose. But also showing that the myth, the legacy, sort of still lingers, at least at the back of popular culture's imagination. It was in anticipation of that film that I thought that this topic would be much more familiar.
Has it aired yet?
I think it has, in fact. I think that it has.
Check that out.
All right. Well, a quick review of my grade sheets suggests I will not need to use a calculator to actually calculate. My fingers will suffice. I want to ask you one more question. In the pre-scientific age, there was, so before modern medicine, neuroscience, or psychology, there was in Europe and going back to the Greeks and the Egyptians as well, one standard theory that explained human behavior. Any thoughts? I could string this out a little bit more. It was based on the human body and fluids, so it did have a kind of medical side to it. Do you know the theory of the four humours? The theory of the four humours.
I'm going to take a shot in the dark and say this has something to do with leeches.
Well, your shot in the dark, it falls very near the mark. Leeches, which is technically a form of bloodletting,
Yeah.
is a medical practice that can have benefits, particularly known for lowering the temperature of someone who has a fever that won't break. And because it is a form of bloodletting, blood is one of the four humours. So, in fact, using leeches is directly related to the theory of the four humours.
I couldn't name them, but I can only think of this in very vague terms. I know I've heard of it.
Sure.
Is it true this is how George Washington died? By using... Wasn't there leeches? And they thought they were curing him, but that's what did him in?
I can't confirm or deny the death of George Washington, but indeed, any form of bloodletting can be fatal. So, such a thing could happen. The word humor kind of refers to the liquid in question. So the theory is that there are four base liquids to our bodies.
Of which blood is one.
Of which blood is one.
Is bile one?
In fact, bile is two, because they divide bile into two categories. But bile is two, so-called yellow bile and black bile.
I'm drawing quite a blank on this one, and I guess it's fair to say I can support that with a statement. According to my critics, I know nothing of the word humor or anything even remotely related to that term. So I'm out.
Well, that is probably because your biles are out of proportion with one another. Since the basic theory, both for medicine and psychological health as well, was that if any of these four humours were out of balance, that's what caused illness. So again, bloodletting, letting one of the fluids out, the idea was that it was balancing it somehow with the others. The fourth humour is one like blood that we would all be familiar with, and that is phlegm.
That is sexy.
It is sexy. Funny you would say that, because phlegm is characterized as the humour which is cold and moist. And that is sexy now that you mention it.
We should get a sound effect in right there, too.
Absolutely. The four humours are characterized as either cold or warm and either dry or moist. And so each of the four have two of those adjectives attached to them. They each have a specific organ they're associated with. Any thoughts? Blood is associated with the...
I'm going to say the heart.
That is such a common sense answer that we don't know why it's not, but indeed it's not. Again, it's a sort of pre-modern medicine, so... Any thoughts? Blood was associated with the liver. Then there's yellow bile and black bile, which is each associated with an organ.
When I think bile, I think intestine.
These are both adjacent to intestine, spleen and gallbladder.
Okay. So I was in the ballpark.
You know, if you were playing baseball in your intestines, you were. And phlegm. I will say my little chart here lists two organs that phlegm was associated with.
The lungs.
The lungs but yes, lungs is one of them, so 5 points for John Hoffner.
And the other lung.
And minus 10 points. for not using your brain, which is the other organ that phlegm is associated with. And I will say, I keep referring to these are associated with mental health as well. So there is a mental health state, or psychological state, which is associated with each of these four humours. The most you probably know all four of these words, but whether or not you've associated them in this matrix of ancient medicine is a completely different question. I will say, though, as a clue that makes sense to me, in the play Hamlet Hamlet is frequently referred to by other characters as being out of humor or out of his humor or otherwise out of balance in his four humors. And he is frequently described as what adjective? There's a famous adjective which is used to describe Hamlet. Theater fans, theater scholars. There's even a phrase, the something something Dane.
I think this is the most embarrassing one that we don't know.
You can live with yourself of not knowing who Lizzie Borden was. Or
To this point.
Who invented.
To know or not to know.
Yes.
How low have we fallen?
Is Mad in there somewhere?
He is described as mad, and that's part of the humors being out of balance. But there's a particular type of madness with which he is described. As a random clue apropos nothing, the word I'm looking for also starts with the letter M. The something Dane.
Magnificent.
He was magnificent, and he was taken from us too early. But magnificent would not be a mental health condition. I suppose thinking you're magnificent might be.
I think there's a mental health condition that's coming to my mind at the moment, which I think pretty much sums up this entire podcast. That would be the state of confusion.
Fusion. I thought you were going to go with amnesia, but confusion is good. Hamlet is known as the melancholy Dane.
Melon.
And melancholia, or melancholic, is one of the four psychological states of unbalance associated. And that's associated with the black bile, which Hamlet's also associated with the color black a lot. So there's like a kind of consistency in thought in that if you weren't aware of the theory of the humors, you could probably guess with a little bit of your wits which mental health out of balance is associated with phlegm. It is the only one of the four that uses its humor as a root word.
The first one was melancholy?
Well, melancholy is associated with black bile. Blood is associated with sanguine. And yellow bile is associated with a choleric personality. And phlegm is associated with someone who has a word that has the word phlegm as a root word.
Flamboyant.
Ooh! Oh, words that sound like other words. That's worth a gold star. Hey, there haven't been many of those in this class. Phlegmatic. Phlegmatic. Well, that is a brief introduction to the theory of the four humors. We can see how well that went.
Is it accurate to still call it I was going to ask you, actually. Was that
Please.
based on superstition initially? Because there can't be good science behind that.
Well, this is all pre-modern science and modern medicine, but I would probably say its development and application probably still represents a version of the scientific method. I mean, just take something like bloodletting or using leeches. It actually did get results. So they weren't doing these things because they patently didn't work. There was some thought that they worked. So,
But the idea of the four humors, it seems like someone would have just had to have made that up and then they ran with it.
well, I can't speak to exactly when it was developed, although it does go back to the Greeks and the Egyptians had versions of the theory of the four humors. And again, nobody today would want a surgeon to be operating on them based upon the theory of the four humors. But I do suspect it has more rudimentary science behind it than pure mythology.
Okay.
For one thing, the actual biles are all human fluids. So again, it's not sort of like ether or superstition. It is saying, oh, there's blood, there is phlegm, there are these biles. When people are sick, we can see, these biles. When someone throws up, you can see blood or bile or phlegm in it. So it just seemed to me just like, again, you would never endorse it as a form of modern medicine, but I do feel like I want to give it slightly more credit than you would give to full-blown sort of mythology or superstition.
The predecessor of medical science.
Yes, I mean, it's still there's observation, application, data, moving forward, adjustments of some kind. Of course, in other mythologies and superstitions, you sometimes find sort of truth mixed with nonsense. So that wouldn't be unusual if the 4 humors had truth and nonsense mixed together. All right, well, I'm going to tally up my final grades and find out who amongst these students is going to win today's
Golden Banana.
Classroom Prize. But before I finalize these grades, I'm going to give each of you one more chance to earn some extra credit. So...
Hand on buzzer, sorry.
That's okay. I was kind of excited. I was waiting to see what would happen when you put your hand on the buzzer. Like, oh my God, something's about to happen over here by John. I want to know what it is. All right. Would anybody like to go first with their extra credit? This is an open field question. You can share any information that you think will help your grade. Marty.
I will, sure.
Go. So what is your...
It's essay style.
Yes. You just tell me what you want to say.
Okay.
And if it's clever, you will get extra credit points.
The War of 1812 was, in fact, fought in 1812.
I will have to do a little research, similar to the earlier how did George Washington die question, before I affirm or deny that suggestion of yours, Marty, but I will take it under advisement.
Thank you. That's all I can ask for at this point, at this juncture.
Richard, would you like to add something?
Well, I would say that in terms of modern murders of families, there was recently, I believe, a little girl who is going to be on trial for murdering her family. And I think she stabbed them a lot of times, like 40 sometimes. But she admitted to the crime.
Right.
So I don't think there's going to be any acquittal there. But isn't interesting. I wonder if she'll have any rhymes made about her in the near future.
Do kids still skip rope? I mean, that would be what's going to hold her back, I think.
Yeah.
I suspect there'll be YouTube videos of people who love her. I think that's what she'll get. You know, her YouTube fans. John, anything for extra credit?
I would just encourage everyone to watch Doctor Who.
Doctor Who?
Yes. That suggestion is tantamount to brown nosing in this classroom, I have to say. And Marty loses 5 points for the most obvious pun of the evening.
BBC channel is running a marathon of Doctor Who all day today. Don't ask.
Nobody who would ask. That's the problem with that pun. All right, having tallied your final grades, it's clear to me that the winner of today's Classroom Prize, the Golden Banana, is Richard K.
Hey!
Congratulations, Mr. K.
Nice work,
Well done.
sir.
And I encourage all of you to go home and do your homework. And that just leaves it for me, your host, Dr. Jerry Jaffe, to thank you, John, Richard, and Marty for attending today's class. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. J. Yes, sir.
Gold Star Classroom is written and produced by Jerry Jaffe. Our producer and engineer is Stephen Gutierrez. Original music composed and produced by Jeff Geddert. Mr. Geddert is also our assistant producer. All commentary and opinions expressed by guests of Gold Star Classroom are meant for entertainment purposes only. For Gold Star Classroom, I'm Jerry Jaffe.